Welcome back to day 2, lesson 2 of 7 days, 7 dimensions. If you didn't get a chance yet, be sure to sign up for the lesson summaries in the description below, which will give you access to all of the lesson replays and MP3s to practice along with. Today, we're going to discuss a dimension you have been practicing your entire life, breathing. More specifically, we're referring to the coordination of muscles below the larynx that surround the lungs. This includes the intercostal muscles situated between the ribs, the diaphragm, and the abdominals. The relationship between these muscles and control of airflow when singing, especially on stage performing without a microphone, can be quite challenging. That's why we invited opera singer GABRIEL Hernandez as today's guest. Gabriel is a multi-award-winning operatic tenor with a string of successes in key roles and critically acclaimed debuts as a featured performer. Having worked with over a dozen theater production companies and nearly 25 residencies across the nation, they are constantly rising to new challenges and breaking new ground, including projects like Taking Up Space, a photo series dedicated to documenting the queer experience in opera, and most recently, portraying the lead role in the world premiere of Yours Forever, Lincoln. And with that, please welcome Gabriel. Hello.
Hello.
It's so nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
We were first connected, I was thinking about this, through Cesar de la Rosa, whom many of you watching this may know from the vocal gym course. But you and I have never met in person because whenever I'm in New York City, you're off singing in some new production company in some other state.
Yeah.
We'll connect at some point. So with today's dimension, breathing, this plays such a pivotal role in everything you do as an opera singer and performer. Can you tell us what challenges you've had to overcome over the years in terms of your breath control, and if it's something that you're still working on?
Yeah. It is something I'm still working. I work on it every single day. And I think the biggest challenge for me was making a routine that would introduce myself into getting ready to breathe every day with those muscles. How do I stretch? What stretches are good for me? And really having a vocabulary to use whenever in the morning when I'm warming up to breathe. So even when I was younger, I would have just really simple stretches, and now I wake up and see how I feel. I get in touch with my body, and then I can say, okay, this is the type of stretch I need to get ready to sing.
I love that. So right away, you're addressing the exterior muscles, really, right? So the lungs, I mean, you made it through the night, you're alive. So you breathed correctly to some point, right?
Yeah.
But when you're on stage, we're asking our body to do something beyond just survival. When we sing, we're asking ourselves to kind of extenuate the intention of breathing with sometimes how long we can breathe, sometimes how loud you might have to go when you sing to project a sound. The dynamics and the expectation in singing is so different than just conversation. And opera specific is a pretty surreal art form, right? Because we're not like singing through the day like this. Well, in our family, we do sometimes because it's fun. But typically with an opera or any musical theater setting, it is a suspension of disbelief that we're setting up, right? So every part of your body is kind of an extended portrayal of itself. So there is a sense of exaggeration, sometimes with vibrato, sometimes with projection, sometimes with volume, just the lyric, the melody, everything. And at the root of that is how you spend your air. By the way, can you suggest maybe someone who hasn't done that before, when you stretch your body, what are you paying attention to? Is it because when I think of stretches for breathing, I'm definitely thinking of like thoracic cavity, right? It's like below the neck, above the waist. It's all the muscles around the rib cage and the lungs.
Yeah.
There's certain like yoga poses or movements that you recommend specifically?
A lot of the stuff that I do is like chest opening, because a lot of the sitting that that we do as Americans really gets your chest and your shoulder blades especially really forward. So I am always thinking about, I can't remember what this stretch is called, but I've been doing it every day and it helps so much. But it's basically like a pull up that
Okay.
you would do into a lunge.
Ah, okay. So
Yeah.
you're great. So you're moving your hips forward and you're keeping your posture back
Exactly. And so
with that.
that helps the postural muscles really understand how it feels to keep yourself upright. And I do that every day. Whenever I'm stretching, I make sure to focus on my spine, because if as a young singer, I would not focus on my spine and then start to use muscles that really didn't weren't involved in my breathing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
People would say breathe low, and I used to think, oh, use my muscles down there. But now I realize you use these muscles and you're still able to breathe low. You know, you're still
Yeah,
able to feel it in
absolutely.
your body.
And that's a theme that we're going to be carrying throughout these 7 days is efficiency of only the muscles required
Exactly.
for that dimension. Because in order to get the most out of your voice, you need efficiency in every group of muscles, and then for them to communicate and coordinate together, of course. So what I wanted to tackle is a few things today. One, I wanted to get to an exercise, of course. We're gonna put you in the hot seat. We're gonna challenge you a little bit with your breathing. And if you're open to it, I would love to hear you sing as well. So based on is there anything that you're working on right now?
Yeah. Right now, I have a big audition coming up, so I'm working on my aria package, which is usually we have 4 to 5 arias that we go in to sing
Okay.
for the audition panel. So I would love to sing an aria from a Spanish opera. It's called Del Destino, from Florencia en el Amazonas. It's about an opera singer who travels in the Amazons.
Oh, very cool. So I'm going to say up front, we will not be addressing articulation because I don't speak Spanish. So we're going to focus just on breathing. Articulation is day 6, so we're not there yet. So what we're going to try is, I'm going to move down a little bit. We're going to do what I call a rapid triplet he. So a triplet pattern sounds like this. So I'm doing like a set of 3, and at the beginning of each note, we're going to put a little H on it.
Okay.
What's really interesting about the H, yesterday we talked about the vocal folds are made up of 5 layers. They come together to vibrate to create sound. The H is the only consonant in the English language that is isolated to the larynx. It doesn't require the lips, tongue, or jaw at all, which is really interesting. So you can create an H, like any shape of sound here, the H is taking place at the larynx.
Yeah.
So it helps us really get into the intrinsic muscles of the larynx right away. So if the folds are open during the H and stiff a little bit as air passes through them, then they have to come together against the airflow to vibrate on that desired pitch. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So to do it quickly, requires the folds to be still for the H, vibrate at 100 and sometimes per second on this particular pitch, stop vibrating for the H, and then come back, stop vibrating for the H. So it's really isometric in terms of getting the muscles to coordinate. And what's interesting is we're not talking about the muscles related to breathing. We're talking about the action here. And its relationship to breathing has to fall in line. And we're going to discover that very quickly. So let's give this a try. I'm going to give another example. Give it a try. Great. Now, when you're doing this exercise, I'm going to recommend that you bring your tongue forward, actually relatively far forward, like all the way here, exactly. So the tongue doesn't pull back and help regulate the air. This is, again, you're going to see this thematically throughout our 7 dimensions here. Yeah. So try that again. Did you notice how it's a little bit trickier?
Yeah.
That second triplet Yeah, the second triplet kind of had a he. We lost some of the definition, and that's okay. The point of the exercise is to discover those things and then work on it, right? So let me move the note. We'll try it again. Yes, and really focus on that.
Okay.
Like every H should be, it's like a cookie cutter, right? Like every H is exactly the same every time.
Okay.
Try it again. There we go. I'm going to move the note around. Breathe in. Once more. Do you notice anything happening as we kind of approach higher pitches?
The H is getting less defined.
I agree. Why do you think that is?
Breath management. I feel like I just need to. The thought gets less clear, and so it's like less clear in the sound.
And there's a mathematical reason behind that too. So there is the mental, almost emotional response, right? Of like, okay, it's a higher note. There's more work. Sometimes we get kind of like trapped into that idea. But as we approach higher pitches, the folds have to go from 0 on the H to vibrating at faster speeds, right? So this compared to you've got to get the folds to go from 0 to vibrate a whole lot faster. Okay, and depending on what register you're in, things like that, that can complicate the communication of that as well.
Yeah.
So what I pointed out earlier is that we're not talking about those muscles I mentioned in the introduction. The reason is an exercise like this is great because you're not wrapped up into what you were saying earlier is like, okay, where do I breathe from? Is it low? What muscles do I squeeze? And that can become really disruptive when it comes time to sing.
Yeah.
So there needs to be a sense of automation with these muscles, which you already have to survive, but we also need it to sing. And the only way you're going to pull off this pattern, very quick and distinct, is if you're using a minimalization of tension below the larynx. You can't, these muscles are large, right? There's thousands of strands of muscles around your rib cage, your diaphragm, which is it sits up pretty high. It's a dome-shaped muscle. And when that flexes, when that contracts, it contracts downward, and that's what pulls on the lungs. That creates a vacuum drawing air into your body. The diaphragm alone is responsible for 60% of your breath control. So that's significant. And you've got these layers of muscles here in your abdominals. If they're tight at all, then the diaphragm can't come down. So that's the benefit of those stretches you mentioned earlier. Getting those muscles loose and responsive is key to breathe well. So if your abs are relaxed, the diaphragm's drawing the air in correctly, then it's more of a controlled release of air when we go to sing. Now, if we think about those muscles and stress those muscles when we sing, then not only are we disconnecting from the story of the song, but we have a tendency to just overload the vocal folds. These muscles are tiny. These muscles are huge. It's really good to be aware of that relationship. So the only way, again, you can pull this off is if you don't overspend here, if you're not tightening here, and that allows these little muscles to just open and close and respond really comfortably. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Looking at it from that way?
Yeah.
So let's try it again. Now you have kind of an understanding of what we're aiming for. I'm actually going to put you up a little bit higher. So join me up here. Bring that tongue forward. Good. And just really look for those H's. It's tricky exercise. You are a seasoned performer, and this exercise can be humbling a little bit, right? Because it's like, this is a really specific thing. Try it again. Try that one again and slow it down just a little bit. There we go. A little overspending at the beginning. You heard like the H kind of spill a little bit, and then it got clean. Try it once more. And back down the octave. There it is. You heard it, and that second and third set sounded great. So it gives you like that model that you want to start off with right away. And over time, you can increase the speed and explore your entire range. So you can do this, ideally over about a 2-octave span. I mean, you want to be able to play with all of the notes you might ordinarily sing with, because that suggests you have a good balance of air and you're not overstressing anything on those notes. It's a really tricky exercise. It seems simple. It's like, oh, how hard could it be? Sounds like I'm laughing, right? And then you go to do it. It's like, oh, there's a lot happening here and getting all the muscles doing. I also know in your style of singing, volume plays a massive role, because when you're not mic'd, you still have to carry your voice over an orchestra or a sound system and reach the person in the back of the room.
A lot of the time it's without a mic, but I do like to practice with mics. I record myself a lot, so I can hear if there's air in the sound, and because that's I think the biggest difference that we've talked about before is there's just no use of air, so the clarity's there. So even if you're quiet, you want to be as clear as possible. And then people will be able to hear you.
No, I love that you brought that up, because that is also, again, a little more opera specific.
Yes.
Because if you're singing rock, blues, country, jazz, R&B, hip hop, like anything else, that's an electronic art form.
And even in, music theater, that's a stage performance, but you're still able to, assess how you use your air, if you want air in the sound.
Yes, there, especially contemporary style. There's more permission for that. And that conversational influence is only available to us because we have a microphone. You can make a whisper fill a stadium.
Yep.
Right? So clarity in your world is essential to carry the sound. Yeah. So understanding if there's a spillage of air, if the folds are slightly open, there's a little gap between the folds, that can not only waste air, but it can take away from your projection. Because you have to take that sound and then amplify it in the resonating space to carry, even if it is at a quiet volume. So if you can imagine working through your entire range with this exercise, and then try it again at a louder volume.
Okay.
And then a louder volume, right? Because now you have to spend air at different degrees of intention that reflects what you're going to need when it comes time to sing. So it's kind of a monster exercise. Like anybody could do it, but there's easily a degree of difficulty that will stop you in your tracks. To work on and to work towards. Do you have any questions with this exercise?
Yeah, how does the difference in compression of the air? Because you said when you get louder and softer, do you find that you really feel the difference in how the chords come together when you're getting louder?
Well, you won't actually feel literally how the folds come together, because we don't have pain sensors in the vocal folds themselves. But there's the feeling in the surrounding area of compression that you can definitely sense, right? So a louder volume is going to require two things. It's going to require more air. Sometimes it requires a push, because if you just take a big ample breath, breathe in, now just let everything go. Did you have to work to let the air out of your body?
No.
So you work to inhale, and then you just let go of tension. The air wants to leave your body anyway.
Yeah.
Because the lungs aren't made up of muscle. The lungs are made up of tiny little air sacs called alveoli. And they're just responding to the muscles around them. So just to let everything go, the resistance of that airflow leaving your body is hitting the vocal folds in the snare that I just gave. So in order to add compression, if you want more volume, you can now use muscles that are a lot of the same muscles I already mentioned, but in an antagonistic relationship. So the diaphragm is when you breathe in, and then you can also control the release as you breathe out. Kind of like if I were lifting up weight, I would contract my bicep to lift the weight, and then I'm still using it as I let the weight down.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the contraction, it's the release of the contraction in combination with the triceps. So when you sing with added air compression, you're releasing the diaphragm this way. And then the added compression is your abdominal layers. So those muscles can squeeze with it. So there's a relationship there. And then that hits the folds. Folds are vibrating as you add air pressure, that the folds are going to vibrate more. The muscles in the larynx are going to thicken. And then the space above takes that sound and can amplify it. And that's the resonating space. And we're going to talk about that more on day 5 when we talk about tone. And that's part of that amplification process of dynamics. Quick note too, the intercostals I mentioned, there's actually 2 sets. There's the internal intercostal muscles, which is going to help exhale. That's a compression on the rib cage on the side of the lungs. And then there's the external intercostal muscles, which is part of your expansion when you take air in. And and generally we don't want to just breathe up here. This is super restrictive. You have to allow the diaphragm to play a big role so you can take air in quickly and comfortably. And just going back to what I was saying before about the diaphragm being responsible for 60% of the air coming in, the intercostal muscles are responsible for around 30%. That's the sides, the front and the back of the lungs that can expand. But there's also like a remaining 10%, the top of the lungs.
Yes.
That's if you lift the shoulders and that could be dangerous because when you engage these muscles, you get another 10% of air, but it could be really costly in terms of tension.
Yes.
And I'm sure you've done that. I certainly have.
This is something that I play with a lot is, as you were saying, like making sure that you're not restrictive in the top of your body. I always think about how ballet dancers, when they're about to do something, they lift their arms up and they have that little bit of breath, but their shoulders are stretching out. And I think with opera, that's the biggest thing with breathing is you play with that little 10% and make sure you don't have tension, and that exactness of how you use the breath.
You have to give the illusion that you're stress-free.
Yes.
Sometimes, even though there is a little bit of stress there because you're activating that. And if you're not singing opera, there's still the storytelling aspect. You want these muscles. Sometimes there's a certain posture the director's giving you, or maybe there's some choreography mixed in, or if you're a metal singer, you're hunched over the mic, and so you need play here to express and tell the story visually, as well as that balance of air. So it's very circumstantial if you use it into what degree.
There's so much to talk about with breath. It's something that's so simple, but when you get to know the muscles more, it becomes even more simple because you're able to actually visualize where you can breathe, instead of saying, "Oh, I need to breathe." You get to really get in touch with your body.
But that's why breathing is used for anger management and meditation, and it's such a central part of our function, right? And you can go a week without food, or so a month without food, a week without water, a few minutes without air. I mean, it's kind of a big deal if you look at the ratio of this. So it's always about balancing the need to survive mixed with the musical intent, in this case, the artistic intent that we're looking for. So anyway, hopefully we touched upon all the anatomy essentials, and we, like you just said, we can talk about this for days, just the breath aspect, and explore all sorts of different breathing techniques. But I do want to get to the execution of our breathing, and I would love to hear you sing. So if you're up for it, let's hear one of those arias that you're working on.
Yeah. Oh. Del destino Yo quiero ser piloto, volar, sentir en el pecho el empuje de los vientos, el retumbo de los truenos, como el aura en la tormenta, la bóveda suspensa, que cobija tierra y mar, volar sin rumbo, volar, venciendo el vértigo, girar sobre el planeta, vagar como una estrella, fugaz, volar sin rumbo, perderme en la noche, lanzarme al fin. Y con un simple roce all'alba intera incendiar. That's Aria.
Yes, beautiful.
Hey.
I like your subtle transition from character to Gabriel there. It was an audition. Usually we have a little more of a transition.
Yeah.
That was great. So one of the things in opera, I mentioned earlier something about wanting to give a bit of an illusion of ease.
Mm-hmm.
But is there stress intended in the character?
Yeah, so this character is on a boat. He's the captain's nephew and is talking to his love interest about what he wants to do and how he's not able to do it because he has to be on this boat. And so this aria, he says, I want to be a pilot because I want to fly and I want to see. I want to be in the middle of a hurricane and feel the wind pushing against my chest. And so it's this tension about how excited he is to do all these things, but he's frustrated because he can't. He knows he can't.
Okay. So that makes sense why I heard some stress points in your tone, facial expressions, right? So that was executed really well. One thing that you have to ask yourself in terms of a choice as a performer is when you take the air in, whether that should be audible or not.
Yes.
As again, this is really relevant to a more of a classical intent versus other styles of music, because with pop, the breath is part of the expectation. So if you're singing, you could hear a gasp, things like that, if it's appropriate to the music and the feel. With classical, if you want to keep that illusion like really intact, when you breathe in, we want zero restriction in the larynx and just above the larynx. It's called the pharyngeal. Oh my goodness! It's called the laryngeal pharynx. It's the lowest part of the throat.
Yes.
And we want that to just dilate. So when you breathe in, you want no resistance there.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if it's a really passionate moment, if it's for telling the story, I certainly have no issue with that. Mm-hmm. But it's a sense of like, okay, the classical purity versus the emotional moment. If you want that restriction in those moments because it tells the story, keep it. But if you're not able to make it silent, then that suggests you're not letting go in those moments in between the breaths. Mm-hmm. So I would recommend when you're taking on any pieces like this is to get through the whole thing completely silent inhales.
Okay.
And that requires letting go of tension, getting a really good balance of your air on the inhalation, which sets you up for a better exhalation.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're like, oh, that seems kind of, there's not enough passion in the moment, then add it in. Add that striction in as part of the story, but not as a need to get air into your body.
Okay.
So yeah, hopefully that helps. It was amazing. It was absolutely beautiful. I'm assuming you're going to get the part.
Me too.
We're just going to give that to you now. Gabriel, thank you so much for doing this with me. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. It's always a really good time working with you.
I appreciate that. And thank you to everyone watching and trying the exercises with us. Tomorrow, we're going to connect what we learned today with our breathing to the control of pitch, which is our third dimension. For now, don't hesitate to leave any questions you have in the comments. Subscribe to this channel for immediate updates on new videos, and don't forget to breathe.